and welcome to this week's Draw, Print and Paint video. This week I want to look at coming back to some of the basics of those drawing techniques that we did in the very first lesson, namely the gestural and the contour drawing, and looking at how Turner, who we're looking at in the painting videos, how his drawings really embody those two ideas and how you could use those in your own work. When Turner died in 1851, he left behind about 300 individual sketchbooks that documented his working life for that last 60 odd years. In them you find a variety of different subject matters, places he visited, sketches for paintings, and they vary from pencil to quick notes in watercolour, the odd letter, etc., etc. But what's interesting, I'll say, is the consistency of his line work and how he drew. It did develop and it changed slightly. The later sketches probably have much more of a gestural quality to them than the early ones. But there's this keen observation of the things that he's seeing around him. And particularly, a vast majority of them are not always about painting or drawing, I should say, whole scenes, but he's picking up on aspects, small parts, details that he's seeing, and later using those in other paintings, or they become the basis of the painting later. In these sketches, you can see him taking in the very small details. If you think about the gestural drawings that we've done when we've maybe sat in a cafe looking at people wandering past, you can see here the fishermen and the cattle are being drawn in that very quick, assured, gestural way. They feel as though they're moving. There's that movement of the fisherman flinging out his rod and those cows coming down to the water's edge to drink. These studies, you can then later see him revisiting them. So, I mean, these are from 1808, and you can see him later revisit these studies in the 1820s or possibly up to the 1830s in this quick watercolour study, the beginning of a painting possibly, or an idea for a painting, and that he's referencing all those major elements but then working out those colour relationships of warms and cools, darks and lights. For those of you that have come sketching out with me at places like Dog Rocks or the You Yangs, etc., you'll remember at those times that I've often told you to not necessarily worry about trying to capture the whole scene, to focus in on elements or contours that you can see that features are making against the landscape. And this is what you see in a lot of Turner's sketches, is that there's these snapshots which he then later builds upon and puts into his paintings there, and he's using his sketches as a way of taking him back to that moment. I know for myself is that, I mean, sketches like these that I've done out at Dog Rocks, they immediately take me back to that time and place. And you see in later Turner's studies, how he begins to use these snapshots, these little elements, and building then whole compositions around them. So this week what I want you to do is use the idea of the contour, but more importantly add to that contour that idea of light to darker lines, so changing the weight of your hand as you move around. You could be looking at architectural details, but it can be just landscapes or even still life. It doesn't really matter what you do for this subject matter. And again, if you're looking at landscape or the built environment around you, don't be necessarily going for absolutely every architectural detail. And be thinking about that with that ability, particularly in terms of architecture, by changing that pressure of that line, is that you're able to start to maybe indicate a sense of light, or the light falling on certain objects. So I mean, for instance, like this, if we just draw sort of a basic shape of a building, for instance, and we can start to give that sense of light being on that building just by changing the weight of that pencil. And then as a final added in, you could just add in an area of tone like that. Now that tells you a lot about what you're looking at there, with a minimum and an economy of line. But also in terms of, as I said, the landscape, I mean, in terms of trees and things like that, that varied wandering line getting finer and heavier is far more interesting than a consistent uniform line. And let your pencil wander. Don't be too conscious about, I mean, that's again a beautiful thing when you do start to look at Turner's sketches, is that there's that feeling of him just wandering and feeling around the shapes that he's looking at. He's not trying to be absolutely descriptive in terms of that line. It's that feeling its way around the subject matter. So just practice, basically. That's your, in terms of that I'm getting you to do, hopefully, and you've continued that with those cloud studies. Let part of the practice of cloud studies be that you start to then just quickly sketch some details that could be later combined with those cloud studies. Take care, and I shall speak to you soon.